What's next? What's next? What's next? And I've been saying, be patient, be patient. I said, I'm working on something. And our plan is we'll unveil it probably next month. But the plan for us is to launch it September 4th, 2018. And it will be black, it will be independent, and it will be unapologetic, which is the way I've been my whole career. So that ain't changing. It's not changing. So if what you can do is you can actually just go to rolandmartin.com. You can put in your email, and then you'll be one of the first folks to get the alert in terms of what we're doing. So pull your phone out right now. That's not rhetorical. That's literal. Pull your phone out and send me. Just go there. Send me an email. Just go to the site. Put your email in. Again, when we get ready to announce, the folks on the email list will actually get the announcement before everybody else, and so you'll sort of get a heads up in terms of what we're doing. But we are excited about it, and I can't wait to unveil it because it's something that I think is really important. Let me also again thank everybody who has made it possible for me to be here. I speak at many business events across the country because this is one of the most important issues for our community. And so with that said, let me just go ahead and be up front. Great to see all these preachers here. My wife is an ordained minister, 23 years. This is what she does. But let me be real clear. God has given her this great spirit of comfort. She'll pray with you. She'll lay hands on you. She'll talk and she'll counsel you. God has given me a spirit of discomfort. I've been put here to make folk feel uncomfortable. So let me just warn you in advance. It might get a little hot in here. Some of y'all may start moving in the seat. We call that butt dancing. And that's when I always say that when I make people on television feel real uncomfortable when they say crazy stuff. And so you might start doing that, but it's okay. Trust me, you'll get through it. You'll get through it. But some things have to be said in a certain way. So I just want to give you that advance notice. Because some of y'all be like, oh my God, did he really just go there? Yes, I did. And so since we are gathered here among so many folks who speak in pulpits, let me go ahead and tag my text, because some of y'all may not quite remember what I'm talking about. Yeah, you're going to remember it, but let me tag the text so you have a name to go with it. So when you leave here, somebody say, what did he talk about? You might be uncomfortable. You might not remember anything else but the title. So I shall call this, I'm Not Satisfied. So look to your left and tell your neighbor, I'm not satisfied. Now look to your right and tell your neighbor, I'm not satisfied. Now I want you to look behind you and tell your neighbor, I'm not satisfied. Then I want you to look at the folks in front of you and say, I am not satisfied. I just want to make sure we are on the same page tonight. One of my favorite movies is the movie Malcolm X. And so I love, there's so many different scenes in Spike Lee's Malcolm X that I love. But my absolute favorite is the scene when Brother Johnson has been beaten by the police. And they go into the police station and they're looking for Brother Johnson. And the cops don't want to talk to him. They're like, I don't know who these Negroes are, dressed in suits and bow ties and clean hats. And then they have to be in the police station, and then he says, look, y'all can leave. And Malcolm X, played by Denzel Washington, tells them, look outside that window. He said, they're not leaving until we leave with Brother Johnson. And the cops didn't realize. See, there's something different in America when a group of black men make it clear we're not moving. That's just, America acts a little different. And so they go to where he was being held, and he's badly bleeding, and then they say, get an ambulance. And so then the ambulance comes, and they're taking him to the hospital, and then one of the officers comes up to Malcolm X and says, all right, you got what you came here for. Now y'all can leave. And he says, no, I'm not satisfied. Then he says, on to the hospital. And see, I think for a lot of us, many of us may be dressed up and live in nice houses and drive nice cars, and we might say that we are 50 years removed from the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and 50 years removed from the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And many of us might look at what has transpired in this country. Might look at you've had black governors, of course, Deval Patrick in Massachusetts and Doug Wilder in Virginia. You've had a black president. You've had African Americans who've been CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and you have African Americans who've been president of Ivy League institutions. And many of us have believed that we somehow have arrived. In fact, with the election of President Obama, many people were saying Dr. King's dream has been realized with the election of President Obama. Anybody who said that and wore that on the t-shirt simply told me that they clearly never even paid attention, read, nor listened to the entire speech Dr. King gave on August 28, 1963, because, see, that speech was not about the election of a black president. See, many of us have also gotten confused with that particular speech, because what has happened is we've gotten so wrapped up in the hoop part of that speech, which is really the bottom part of that speech. See, I know preachers should understand the hoop part. See, that's when that's when you do your thing, you get emotional, you start rhyming, you start feeling it. But the reality is there's no real sermon based upon the hoop. It's actually based upon the scripture. So the actual scripture of that speech is the top 2/3 of that speech, which really was a radical economic speech. Remember, it was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. See, the freedom part was directly tied to economics. It wasn't just about civil rights. It also was about silver rights. And see, where so many of us have gotten confused is that we somehow believe that the Black Freedom Movement, others call it the Civil Rights Movement, was one that was based on that first phase of just civil rights, when if anybody actually read Dr. King's book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here, he said that was the first phase. Then there was a second phase. See, it's the second phase that folks have not been prepared for, because if anybody actually studies his life, the 5 years after that, he had this intense focus on economics, because he knew and understood where African Americans were. We had to deal with economics because of the mass poverty taking place across the country, because we were frozen out of systems literally for the previous 350 years. Next year we'll commemorate the 400th anniversary of 21 Africans arriving in Virginia in August of 1619. You had 243 years of slavery, 10 to 12 years of Reconstruction. Then, of course, you had the Great Compromise of 1877, related to 92 years of Jim Crow. See, that's called American history. See, I know some of y'all saw Laura Ingram's show the other night when she was on Fox News, where she said America was founded on freedom. I'm like, no, Laura, America was founded on freedom for white folks, because while you were talking about freedom for y'all, we were still oppressed and in bondage. When you begin to study American history and see how we were frozen out of every major institution, even when we were able to acquire land, land was stolen from us. Even when we had the ability to move up one step, we had to all of a sudden was pulled back 2 or 3 steps. That's actually the story of African Americans in America for the last 398 and a half years. That has been our story. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. I know some of y'all may be looking at me saying, yeah, but that was so long ago. No, let me just take you back 10 years ago, when we had a housing crisis in America where 53% of black wealth was wiped out due to the home foreclosure crisis. All of the gains we made in the 1980s when it came to home ownership was wiped out more than 10 years later because of what was taking place in America. We saw redlining in the 60s and 70s, and then we saw subprime loans happening with black folks in the 2000s. And again, 53% of all black wealth was wiped out because of the home foreclosure crisis. They would estimate it would be another 200 years for us to reclaim the money that we lost in the home foreclosure crisis. See, and I know, we really don't want to go there, but some of y'all remember that because you had some family members who moved in with you because they lost their homes. And see, we got to call it is what it is, because there were banking institutions, financial institutions in America that were pushing black folks into subprime loans, even though they qualified for prime loans. You can't tell me that is not sophisticated Jim Crow. I'm not satisfied with the folks who are living in the status quo. See, I'm not satisfied with banquets and community programs and little leagues. What I'm talking about is when African Americans have been shut out of the financial system in America. That to me is a fundamental problem. And what I'm concerned about is whether or not we have banking institutions, financial institutions, and Wall Street that gives a damn about African Americans' economics, and they'll be willing to do what is right, what is just, what is fair, and not take our deposits, but never extend loans. See, I told you it's going to be a little uncomfortable. You see, I remember going to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2014 and walking to my hotel for a Radio 1 event, looking at the Wall Street Journal, and there's a story across the front page of the Wall Street Journal that said that in 2013, $23.09 billion in small business loans were dispersed across America, and African American businesses got $385 million or $23.09 billion. 1.7%. In fact, in the last year of President Bush, 2008, black businesses got 8.2% of all small business loans. That dropped to 1.7% under President Barack Obama. Why? Because if you read the story, you will see that it was all because of the home foreclosure crisis. If you want to go find it, fine. March 14th, 2014. That's the date of the story. It was a Saturday. And so I'm reading this story, and if you want to understand how does a group somehow never move ahead, it is because when you are frozen out of advancement, even if you have the degrees, even if you have the business plan, even if you have the knowledge, you're somehow frozen out, because the problem with the homes was simply no home, no loan, no business. Because the history of black folks, we don't simply have the same collateral as white Americans. The average family in America, white family in America, $171,000 in wealth. The average African American family, $8,000 in wealth. Why is that? White Americans largely have their money in stocks, bonds, 401ks, and investments. Black folks largely homes. Lose home, no wealth. It's that simple. And so I began to press President Obama's SBA, saying I need somebody to come on Tom Jordan on Monday to explain to me what you're doing to ensure we're getting access to capital. Then they kept playing games and not want to return phone calls. And so I had a meeting with the White House. And I said, let me be real clear with you. I said, I might be talking, and I'm telling you exactly what I said in the old executive office building to one of President Obama's folks. I said, I might be on television talking about sports. I might be on TV talking about entertainment. I said, and I'm going to whoop y'all ass on these loans. Oh, no, I said that. Oh, because see, do you understand? I wasn't enamored with the black president. See, I didn't vote for Obama just to be happy we got a first family. No, I expected some things to change. And so, remember, too many black folks got caught up in him being the first black. You forgot he was the 44th. We were afraid to ask things because he was the first black. See, I wasn't afraid to ask for jack. Everybody else asked for stuff. Hispanics did, gay folks did, Chamber of Commerce, white folks, rural folks, black folks. We stayed in the inauguration parade for 8 years waving, shocked to see a first black family, while everybody else began to ask for stuff. Then you wonder what the hell happened 8 years later. That's why you were still waving at the inauguration parade. I told you some of y'all were going to be a little uncomfortable. And so 90 days later, we're sitting in the White House for a meeting, and they knew exactly what I was going to ask. That was an off-the-record meeting, but whatever. And that was the first question I asked the president. I said, what you going to do about these loans? And see, they thought I was playing. No, I was dead serious. See, I wasn't there for a photo op. See, when you see me do what I do on television and radio, I'm the same way when I'm in a meeting. Just like when I met with Jared Kushner this week on Wednesday dealing with prison reform, don't think I wasn't asking him tough questions. See, I'm not there just to be happy. See, some folks are present. Some people prefer to have presence. And so I challenge the Obama administration saying, what are you going to do to make sure African Americans are getting more small business loans? And I pressed him so hard that the next day they called me and they said they had a cabinet meeting, and he made a beeline to the head of the SBA, said, you need to meet with Roland Martin. I'm like, yes, you do. And so when we met, I walked in, they had pomp and circumstance. I was like, I ain't here for this. Let's talk about money. Because see, I'm not satisfied with just being where we are. Because see, I understand that in 25 years, America will be a nation that is majority people of color, and we cannot look like South Africa in 2043, where you have majority people of color running in the country, but you have whites controlling the wealth of a nation. Because what we have to understand is that black folks, yes, built this nation with our sweat equity, with our labor, and we might sit in this convention center right here, but you're a stone's throw away from the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, and the reality is folks paid with their blood and their grit and their sweat to build this nation, and damn it, America still owes us for what we built. You have insurance companies and the banks. See, remember, if you really want to understand America, what you have to understand is that when America was founded, there was no economy in this nation. Slavery was the economy. You read Gerald Horne's book, he lays out that really one of the motivating factors for the American Revolution was not dropping some tea in the Boston Harbor. No. He said it was the fear of the 13 colonies that Britain would outlaw slavery. And they said, oh no, that's our only economy. And so you get the American Revolution. Then, of course, you had the creation of the United States Constitution, where slavery played a critical role in every aspect of the convention, because that was driving the economic driving force of America. How did America become great? Not because of the Industrial Revolution, because of the free capital we supplied to make the Industrial Revolution possible. All you got to do is read Edward Baptist's book, The Other Half Never Told. See, some of y'all went to school reading his story. See, I understand history. And so when we look at what's happening today, what happens today, the state of African Americans today is a direct reflection of what has happened in the last 398 and a half years. When you begin to look at in terms of our communities, the inability to be able to move to other places, so therefore we could not even own many of the homes we lived in. Then you go back and begin to look at what happened in those neighborhoods where when we moved in, we couldn't own them. They were charging us 5 times more than the folks who just left. We were already not making money. So imagine making as little money as possible, now paying 5 times more, which means most of your money is going to pay for the housing you cannot even own. And then, of course, when it's time, when you want to sell, then you can't even sell it for a fair value. So somebody white over here sells their house for $20,000. You sell your house for a portion of that. They can take their excess capital, invest that, send their kids to college. All you can do over here is say, great job. See, that's the difference between us. When I spoke at a housing conference a few years ago, I met a sister who's in North Carolina. Her job was to ensure they did not have front companies in North Carolina. So she was talking to the largest construction company in North Carolina. Can I get some water, please? She was the largest construction company in North Carolina. And she was talking to the sons and she said, how did y'all, get this thing started? I said, well, our daddy was in the military. And so daddy, war's over, and he said, how about if I get some of that excess construction equipment? I appreciate it. And so they let daddy take some excess government handout equipment to start a construction company. So here were the sons, 50 years later, now running North Carolina's largest construction company, multi-million dollars, that was started because daddy got some government handouts, free equipment to start a company. Please show me a black soldier who was allowed to leave with a free shovel. So that means this company is the largest construction company in North Carolina, which means that they're second-generation millionaires, which means their kids' will be third- and fourth-generation millionaires because daddy was able to walk off of a military base and start his business not with a loan, not with capital, but he took free government equipment to start his business. And you can't show me a black soldier who also gave his life or was injured in the same war who was allowed to leave with the shovel, then you somehow tell me we're starting at the same level. No, that simply is not true. See, I have to lay all of these things out because, see, too many of us are walking around as if that stuff is so long ago, when in fact, the things that took place 30, 40, 50, 150, 200, 300 years ago has a direct impact on what is happening today. See, if you really want to get serious about this, begin to ask yourself, who controls the economic levers of power in Cincinnati? I didn't say political power. I said economic power. See, who controls the critical positions? Who controls the various community development groups? Who controls the various tax abatement groups? Who controls where the money is coming in? Who controls in terms of conventions and visitors? Who controls chambers of commerce? Who is controlling those levels of power? And then ask yourself, where are we? See, what I'm concerned about, I'm not interested in building more black businesses. Some of y'all might say, what? No, I want larger black business with capacity. See, facts don't lie. Right now, there are 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America. 2.5 million only have one employee. 7 years ago, we had 1.9 million black-owned businesses. 1.8 million had one employee. 7 years ago, we had 1.9 million black-owned businesses. They had an average revenue of $114,000. Today, we have 700,000 more black-owned businesses with an annual revenue of $54,000. So we have an increase of 700,000 black-owned businesses, yet revenue's been cut in half, and then again, nearly every single one of them, except 100,000, only have one employee. So therefore, how can a community grow and prosper if we still are living in economic apartheid? Which means that when we begin to ask these questions, we begin to talk about housing and redevelopment. We begin to talk about economic redevelopment, revitalizing neighborhoods, not just when it comes to where someone lives, not just streets, not just parks, not just sewer systems and lights. I'm also talking about what happens when you talk about those businesses that want to be able to be created. What happens when you're talking about shopping centers and grocery stores and retail outlets? What happens when you begin to talk about those places? Who is owning those particular places? Can you have the capacity to be able to own them? See, if you're talking about a dry cleaner, I don't want to just own one. Can I own three? Can I own five? How can I grow? How can I prosper? If I'm being frozen out of the economic system in America, then we'll be in the exact same position today, 200 years from now, we are today. That, to me, is a problem. Which means that we have to sit across the table from folks in the financial industry and make it perfectly clear we are dead serious about what we're talking about here, because I'm not interested in your community affairs money. What I want is your community development money. Oh, let me say that again. I'm not interested in your community affairs money. I'm not interested in photo ops that run on your website. I don't want to see just photos of folks handing out small checks at events. What I want to see are photos of individuals signing multi-million-dollar loans. See, we can't talk about freedom if we don't want to deal with the hardcore reality of how to make that possible. I told you earlier, Dr. King wrote his book, Chaos, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, which happened to be his worst-selling book, released in 1967. Every single person in this room, whether you're black, white, Latino, Native American, does not matter, should have a copy of this book. It is a book where he details the fundamental problems that America is facing. And in fact, if you actually read the book, you will realize that what has happened over the past 50 years, he literally laid out in the book. He detailed exactly what was going to happen. I told you earlier this whole idea of this first phase. He said in the book that civil rights was the first phase. What we did in Selma was the first phase. Birmingham was the first phase. He said Albany, Chicago was the first phase. But then if you go back and listen to the speech that he gave to the SCLC in August of 1967, where he talked about, entitled where do we go from here, he talked about Operation Breadbasket. He talked about what that was about. You see, Operation Breadbasket was what he created when he sent Reverend Jackson to Chicago to put pressure, preachers put pressure on businesses to ensure African Americans were getting their products on their shelves. So what they would do, they would go to the businesses and they would sit with them and they would say, this is what the problem is. And then, of course, the business would then say, well, we're not interested. They would then say, well, we're going to unleash an economic boycott on your company if you don't. And then they said, well, then you go right ahead and try. And so they did. Well, when you had businesses depending upon 90% of black folks' money, trust me, it didn't take them long to realize that was an error in their ways. See, the point there is these were preachers who were not focused on Bible study on Wednesday and preaching on Sunday. They used their power Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. See, I never expected to get much applause on that one, and that's fine because you know I'm not lying. Because, see, you cannot talk about biblical liberation on Sunday and you're still living in apartheid on Monday. I'm not solely interested in loans that fund new buildings. I'd rather have loans that fund communities. Because when you fund communities, then guess what? Your community will fund your business or your building. See, what Dr. King laid out with Operation Breadbasket, he understood that if you did not have that level of pressure being brought to bear on companies, they would not do what is necessary. Because just look at American history. Black folks never got anything in America just because. Frederick Douglass said, agitate, agitate, agitate. Power concedes nothing without a demand. When you look at Ida B. Wells Barnett, when you look at A. Philip Randolph, here to threaten FDR with the March on Washington just to get him to move with the executive order. The exact same thing happened when it came to Truman, when it came to Eisenhower, when it came to Kennedy, when it came to Nixon. You look at the history of America, is black folks have always had to force America to do what is right. We've never been given anything in 398 and a half years. We've had to fight for every single thing that we have gotten. And we also understand that other folks have greatly benefited from our fights. If you're a woman sitting in here and you are a doctor or a lawyer or engineer or professor, you appreciate Title IX, which opened the door for professional schools, where you ask the average woman what Title IX is. They can't even tell you where it comes from. But Title IX is a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which means that it was black blood shed to get that act passed, which opened the doors for women across this country. So I keep telling white women in America, you have benefited from affirmative action more than anybody else in the country. So I fully expect you to say something when there are attacks on affirmative action, because you have gotten paid as a result of that. Folks who are Japanese or Korean or Latino who vote in their native tongue, thank black people, because that's the provision of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Matter of fact, I tell gay folks, you love same-sex marriage, thank black people, because without the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment, a Reconstruction Act, that was the basis of the Supreme Court's ruling. What I'm laying, matter of fact, if you disable in America and you appreciate having ramps, that's a 1996 American Disabilities Act, thank black people, that's a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Every single thing that black folks have fought for has benefited everybody else, because as Dr. King said, we are here to redeem the soul of America and to make America be the nation it is on paper, not the nation it is in reality. So Dr. King asked the question, where do we go from here, chaos or community? And in fact, he does something in the book which I think which is wonderful, because he lays out very clearly who should be doing the work. This is what Dr. King says. There are already structured forces in the Negro community that can serve as the basis for building a powerful united front. First, he says, the Negro church. Then he says, the Negro press. Then he says, the Negro fraternities and sororities. Then he says, and Negro professional associations. We must admit that these forces have never given their full resources to the cause of Negro liberation. There are still too many Negro churches that are so absorbed in a future good over yonder that they condition their members to adjust to the present evils over here. Too many Negro newspapers have veered away from their traditional role as protest organs agitating for social change and have turned to the sensational and the conservative in place of the substantive and the militant. Too many Negro social professional groups have degenerated into snobbishness and preoccupation with frivolities and trivial activity, but the failures of the past must not be an excuse for the inaction of the present and the future. These groups must be mobilized and motivated. This form of group unity can do infinitely more to liberate the Negro than any action of individuals. We have been oppressed as a group, and we must overcome that oppression as a group. That's the Dr. King folk don't want to talk about. He lays out clearly in terms of how this is going to change, and it is going to require the folks who are over large amounts of people who have the ability to literally press a button and members will follow their lead. But see, what that requires, though, it requires folks, as he said, not operating as individuals, but operating as a group. So I'll ask you this. After you leave here tonight, the question then becomes, what challenge will you lay down in Cincinnati? When you leave here tonight, will you be like the brothers in the Fruit of Islam who walked down that street from the police station to the hospital? Will you see a recreation of that in Cincinnati, where a group of preachers, black men and black women, will march down the streets, going from city hall to county government, saying we are not satisfied with what we have gotten. We are here to address the economic apartheid happening in this city and in this region, and we simply will not go away until you answer our demands. I want to know, is that what you're willing to do? Because see, really, this event should not be simply something where you come to every single year and, if we really are honest, become a Negro check-off event. Where you say, I went to the event, took me a picture, check it off, I'm good, see you next year. No, what this event really should serve is sort of like when you renew your marriage vows. This should be a yearly reminder of the commitment when it comes to driving business, in terms of building community, being able to expand capital. What really should be happening, also a part of this event next year, is not just giving out awards, but you should have a part of this where you say, this is where we were last year, and this is what we've done in the last year, and I'm talking about how we're able to grow capacity, grow businesses, and grow capital. We should be able to come back next year. You should be able to come back next year and be able to say, our business, we're doing this, but this is how we were able to take these 2 or 3 construction companies who are making this and move them to here. And these companies in environmental architecture were here and move them to here. And janitorial services from here to here. You should be coming back saying, this is how we challenge these companies in this city when it comes to minority supplier development to ensure that we're getting those jobs. See, I'm talking about every single one of these companies. They buy toilet paper, they buy pens, they buy pads, they buy technology. And so the question is, how are they ensuring that our companies are able to get in those doors? See, I'm not interested, again, in community affair dollars. I'm talking about how do we change the game to look up and you see businesses that have capacity and that go from 5 employees to 20 to 50 to 100 to 200. That should be the goal for every single person in this room. But this cannot happen and it will not change unless there's a collective that is willing to stand up and challenge power where it exists. And when a collective stands up as a group, then other folks are afraid of a collective. See, it's real easy to take out one, but it's hard to take out 100 or 200 or 500. And it requires a level of pressure where folks understand we will come back day after day, night after night, show up at your job, and even show up at your house if you are not doing right by our people. Because it is one thing to continue to ask us to build America in 2018. At some point, the check has to be due, and I say, damn it, it's time to start cashing real checks. Because that's what Dr. King talked about when he said a check was stamped insufficient funds on August 28, 1963. That's what he was talking about on April 3rd, 1968, when he said we're going to pass the pain around. He said because we're going to challenge folks who are unwilling to do business with us. Time out It's time out for nonsense and for games. I'm not satisfied with games. I'm not satisfied with status quo. I'm not satisfied with incremental change. I'm talking about there has to be a revolution when it comes to economics, and it is only going to happen when you have people of conscience, people who are not scared, people who don't have any fear, who will look power in the eye and say, you can take me out, but you can't take all of us out at one time. And if you take all of us out, guess what? We get a whole new crop coming back. Take them out, a whole new crop coming back. Take them out, a whole new crop coming back. And when you look power in the eye in Cincinnati and Ohio, then you are able to look to them and say, if you're unwilling to do it, we will then mobilize our voting numbers and take you out of office and put people in office who are going to do right. I am not interested in sameness. I am not interested in the same thing. I am willing to tell folks we are going to put it all on the line because the decisions that you make today as a group will impact your children's children. There were people who made decisions who you have never met, who you did not know, who knew they were never going to benefit from changes in this country, but they put it all on the line. Whether they were slaves or free slaves or folks who were forced to be sharecroppers, they said, I will never see the promised land, but I'm going to make sure my children's children see it. So you must have the same fervor, the same attitude, the same willingness to fight for what is right and say, I'm not satisfied. And if somebody tells you, well, we have done all the fighting we can, well, then you tell them, well, you clearly don't understand our history, because we have not gotten this far without faith and without fighting. And if you really need a biblical understanding of this, what has happened with us, all you got to do is go to 2 Samuel 23:11. Where the people of Israel were fleeing in a battle, and there was a field of lentils, and they said, look, we ain't got time to fight over this lentil. But Shammah, one of David's mighty men, said, no. If God gave it to us, I'm going to fight over this. And he stood on that ground and fought with his left hand and his right hand and defeated everybody who came at him. Black America, we have been a field of lentils for 398 and a half years. Somebody has to be willing to be a Shammah and stand up and fight with left hand and right hand for what's right and for what's just. You got to decide today whether you want to be a Shammah or the folks who ran from the battle. I'm not willing to run from any fight because my ancestors did not run from a fight. And like my frat brother Burton Woodson Tandy said, when it comes to fighting, he said we will fight until hell freezes over, then we will fight on the ice.